Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
On March 6, 2026, Disney and Pixar released their newest original feature animated film, Hoppers. Directed by We Bare Bears creator Daniel Chong, the movie is about an animal lover named Mabel, who uses new technology created by her college professor to communicate with beavers and other animals to try and save the glade she grew up loving from being destroyed by the city's new beltway. The movie is completely unhinged and amazing, and has been getting absolutely rave reviews. It's also the highest grossing original film opening in years, which is kind of sad, but yay Hoppers! But of course, like with anything, we can't have something good without negativity. Perfectly balanced, I suppose. The day Hoppers released, the Wall Street Journal put out an article in which they interviewed Pixar's current chief creative officer, Pete Docter. In this interview, he defended some of Pixar's recent decisions to cut LGBTQ representation from some of their recent projects, such as Elio, in which Elio was originally going to be depicted as having a crush on another boy. He said, "We're making a movie, not hundreds of millions of dollars of therapy." Yes, the guy who literally directed Up, Inside Out, and Soul said this. He also said that they didn't want to force parents to have to answer questions from their kids that they weren't ready for. Yeah, I already talked about how great that works with menstruation.
How do I explain to my children that skeletons are inside of people?
And you're probably thinking that these decisions must have come in the wake of Trump's re-election, but remember, Elio got delayed from a 2024 release to 2025, and this was partially because of the strikes, but also because of a test screening in 2023 where Elio got a lukewarm reception. People liked it, but nobody raised their hands when asked if they'd pay to see it in a movie theater. Which I feel like is a strange question to ask a room full of people who jumped at the chance to see a test screening of a movie for free, especially when we're talking about a studio that notoriously released multiple original films at a loss on streaming, but what do I know? I also think it's really funny that they're using the changes they made to Elio as a good example when it was a massive flop. So clearly sanding off the gayness didn't make more people want to see it. And unfortunately, this isn't the first time we've heard about LGBTQ representation being axed from Disney media in recent years. Back in 2024, shortly after Captain Cheeto won the White House again, we found out about the shelved episode of Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, The Gatekeeper. I've had a lot of people ask me if I could cover that episode of Moon Girl, and obviously I'd love to, but because it was leaked content Disney hasn't officially released yet, it's a complete no-go for me. I can't risk losing my actual job that gives me health insurance. I know a lot of people will jump to saying that Disney's cowardly and that they should just release the episode already. And while I don't disagree, I think the fact that this episode was approved, fully produced, fully animated in color, completed, and then shelved goes to show just how quickly the discourse surrounding trans rights has taken a nosedive. Trans athletes make up a tiny fraction of people who actually participate in sports, largely because of how much hate they face. But President Dump Truck made this issue a cornerstone of his campaign rhetoric, along with blaming everything wrong with America on diversity, equality, and inclusion programs, not understanding how tariffs work, and incoherently rambling about Hannibal Lecter like he's a real person.
That's Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal Lecter.
The late, great Hannibal Lecter. He'd like to have you over for dinner. The late, great Hannibal Lecter. Okay, they say, why would he mention Hannibal Lecter?
And honestly, the stuff that he did in that movie is pretty tame compared to what I did on that island with Jeffrey Epstein. But of course, Donald Trump won largely because of Elon Musk. His administration has been so much worse with regards to trans rights in particular this time around, and I think that's entirely because of Elon Musk's influence. The man's had 14 kids, most of them through sex-selective IVF, and they all f***ing hate him. He took an engineering approach to have all male children, with a daughter at the end with a surrogate just for funsies, I guess. As a result, he hates that one of his kids that he paid to engineer as the perfect specimen of male offspring turned out to be trans and wants nothing to do with him. The irony is that he doesn't respect his daughter's identity, and yet he wants us all to call Twitter X, because he thinks the name sounds cool and definitely not like a
Corn
site. He can't stand not having things go the way he wants them to, which is why he bought Twitter on his way down the right-wing garbage hole, which ultimately led him right to helping Dumpster Fire win the White House again. But they had a falling out super early on in the administration, and he's already gone, to the shock of almost nobody. Now he's running a cyberpunk Steak and Shake, which is also failing, not unlike the actual Steak and Shake. Steak and Shake is removing all microwaves from its restaurants. We expect every unit to be microwave-free by April 15th. Quality restaurants don't need microwaves. It is part of our journey to improve food quality and use traditional methods of cooking only. Eat real food, and God bless America. What the hell were you even microwaving in your burger, fries, and milkshake operation? Chili? Were you microwaving your chili? But Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur wasn't the only show that was supposed to have trans representation that ultimately didn't fly. I want to talk about the Pixar series Win or Lose. One of my favorite mechanics in storytelling is when the camera is pulled back and we get to see a different perspective of a sequence of events. Phineas and Ferb loves doing this. We got episodes like Unfair Science Fair, Bubble Boys / Isabella in the Temple of Sap, and B-Day / B-Story, where we see the events of the same day unfold from two different perspectives. Delivery of Destiny, which follows the events of a typical episode of the show from the perspective of a third party, that being Paul the Delivery Guy, and all of this ultimately culminating in Phineas and Ferb's Star Wars, where the whole fun of it was being a parallel story happening alongside the events of episode 4.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, tell him I'm doing great.
We're sending a squad in.
Negative. We have a reactor leak here now. Give us a few minutes to lock it down.
A large leak, very dangerous.
Who is this? What's your operating number?
I was just getting into that conversation.
But of course, with the introduction of Disney+, all of the various studios at Disney were asked to develop streaming content. Pixar was asked to develop shows based on existing franchises, which gave us Cars on the Road and Dream Productions. But they were also asked to develop an original animated series. And in December 2020, that was announced to be Win or Lose. When working on Toy Story 4, Carrie Hobson and Michael Yates realized that they had different interpretations of how their creative meetings went.
One thing we kind of noticed was just like we would often have like different impressions of the same event, and we would always talk about it, like, why do you have that perception of this? Why do I have that perception of this?
We'd always be analyzing how we each had like a different interpretation of how like a meeting went.
One of us would feel like, oh, that was terrible. The other was like, no, I think it was fine. What are you talking about? Why are you so negative?
The spirit of that kind of idea kind of gave birth to the idea of win or lose and how we all kind of experience things differently.
And that led to the idea of an animated series revolving around one central event and multiple characters' point of view of that event. It was a really bold creative experiment in storytelling, the kind of thing only Pixar could pull off, and the end result was nothing short of spectacular. If you haven't watched Win or Lose yet, I highly recommend you pause this video and go check it out, because I will be delving into spoilers. It's a quick watch and it's really fantastic. And if you're among the people who have been avoiding watching this show because of the trans rep that was cut, I really recommend you go watch the show anyways, and you'll see why as I discuss it here. I actually had originally wanted to make a regular video about Win or Lose where I review the series as a whole, and maybe if this video does really well I can still do that. So if you want to see me talk more about Win or Lose, be sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. But obviously, because of how important trans rights are to me, I felt like this issue was important to focus on first and foremost. Trans actress Chanel Stewart was cast to play Kai, and was naturally disappointed when the references to her character being trans were dropped out of fear of backlash. Not only is the whole argument against trans women in sports dumb as hell because people with all sorts of different body types exist anyways, but it's especially meaningless in the context of this series because this is a co-ed softball team anyways. I've also seen a fair amount of confusion with people thinking that the entire episode was cut. That's not the case at all. Kai is still the focus of the 7th episode, they just cut moments where it's explicitly stated that Kai is trans. But the thing is, if you know anything about anything, Kai is still obviously trans. There were some early storyboards that got leaked showing Kai having a dysphoric episode, and that's not in the final show, but the dysphoria element is still there, and you don't have to look for it very hard. Kai's story actually begins a year before the championship game. She's closed off and hides old pictures of herself, implying that she's really trying to distance herself from her past, and that may even be the reason why she and her father moved to a new town for a fresh start in the first place. Sort of like Barney in Dead End, only she's not squatting inside of a theme park haunted house. She's intrigued by the co-ed softball team she sees playing, and ends up joining them. She's quickly welcomed to the team, and starts to come out of her shell. We get to see her grow more and more comfortable and confident as the year progresses. In this show, each character we focus on is given a unique, larger-than-life animation device. Lori's animation device, for example, is that her anxiety manifests in a giant ball named Sweaty.
This is good, because it's high stakes, and that's the kind we like.
Frank the Umpire puts up a suit of armor when he puts his guard up, Rochelle turns into a businesswoman, and so on and so forth. Kai feels like she's on top of the world when she's playing softball with her friends who make her feel loved and accepted. So her animation device is that she literally floats. That's why I have the balloons, because they float. And it's pretty obvious that this
is a lot, but listen. Nothing can change the fact that I love you, all right? I love you.
Isn't actually a conversation about softball. It's about a father who's having a hard time accepting that his child is changing and growing into a different person from what he had expected and maybe hoped for. Danny Flowerheart on Instagram made a post about Kai on Trans Day of Visibility, which gave more insight into what was originally planned. This is a small snippet of the monumental amount of care and skill that went into developing Kai. Every department, from casting to story to animation to shading to lighting, and everything outside and in between, handled her with a reverence and kindness that I wish I could hand deliver to every trans person who needs it right now. As many audience members have guessed, Kai's conversation with her dad at the head of her episode was never about baseball. It was her coming out. We explored representing Kai's dysphoria as if it abstracted her face into fractured pieces. We aimed to represent what Kai was experiencing inside, rather than create an antagonist creature like we did with Sweaty and Lori. This actually is kind of similar to what they did with Zooble in Amazing Digital Circus, and I think they did that dysphoria theme very well.
I don't like myself. I hate this body. I hate all these stupid removable pieces. I just want to find something that feels good.
We wanted to translate the puzzle pieces to 3D forms, while also trying to avoid anything that would make her look scary or monstrous. We never wanted to take away her humanity. As we explored these visuals, we realized that making the abstract forms look and feel similar to Kai's body made the experience feel too external and a little creepy, and it would greatly impact how we would have to animate her face. For these reasons, we branched away from the physical puzzle face effect. It was a really cool visual experiment though. We returned to 2D for Kai's dysphoria, and additionally developed the sinking and scratches to express Kai's pain without distorting her physical form. While we love the visuals we created for when Kai is feeling down, it was important to us to establish a positive foil to avoid implying that the trans experience is an exclusively negative one. For this reason, we set out to capture trans joy. Kai floats when she feels affirmed and is surrounded by joyful colors and light. When Kai meets the Pickles, it was the first time she used her chosen name, and we learned that Hannah is non-binary.
I'm Lori.
Rochelle.
Ewan, lucky head.
Hannah. My pronouns are they and them.
I'm Taylor.
Look, I caught a cicada.
And this is my annoying little brother, Ira.
Welcome to the team.
Woo! Let's go!
I didn't get your name.
Let's go!
Yes!
Kai. My name is Kai.
Again, it's really easy to just call Disney cowardly for forcing this to be dropped, especially with the statement they made. When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline. Yeah, I already talked about how great that works with menstruation.
How do I explain to my children that skeletons are inside of people?
Anyway, tonight on It's the Mind, we examine the phenomenon of deja vu.
But the fact of the matter is that Disney is a business, and these shows do need to make money. And obviously they would prefer not to have obnoxious internet backlash. I think the execs at Disney are, for the most part, socially progressive and do want the company to be able to make more inclusive content. But they still do have to think about what kind of reception things will get. Not just here in the US, but internationally. Other countries have varying cultural standards, and that of course includes LGBTQ representation, but it can also include things like depictions of the afterlife. The Haunted Mansion movie that came out in 2023 never played in China because it doesn't jive with the country's collective beliefs about the afterlife. And that's why Hong Kong Disneyland has Mystic Manor instead of a more traditional Haunted Mansion. So something with strong LGBTQ representation is either going to end up being censored or just not air at all in these countries. And to Disney's credit, they were actually willing to take those kinds of hits with shows like The Owl House, Amphibia, Molly McGee, and Moon Girl. Basically, any reference to anyone being LGBTQ gets you an automatic "this is not for kids" in Singapore, which leads to Molly McGee's Season 1 being rated PG over there, while Season 2 is rated M18? You're telling me this kitten, this small child, is rated M18 in Singapore? I say gay rights. Rainbows for everybody. Whee! Strangely enough, The Owl House's first season got an M18, while Season 2 got an NC-16. I don't know what standard that is. What, was Lumity slightly more acceptably gay for their taste in Season 2? I know Moon Girl also got no grace from the Singapore rating system because, in addition to depicting Casey's dads and Brooklyn, it also very accurately depicts tagging culture in New York City, and Singapore has very strict, borderline draconian laws against graffiti. And then sometimes your show's main character's name has to be changed in a localization because a word South Africa uses to mean cool can mean smoking weed in Germany. Smoke weed. Smoke weed every day. All of this to say, the execs knew when they greenlit The Gatekeeper that it would never air everywhere. But they were willing to take a hit on it because the show's progressive nature is a part of its DNA. But then things got so bad in the US from the time the episode was greenlit to when it was supposed to air in 2024 that the decision was just made to hold the episode. I'm not sure what the original plan would have been with Win or Lose, but my guess is that the localizations would have still changed the dialogue as needed, like the famous Owl House Dress Up and Travel Together edit.
我们盛装出游吧？不，被抢先一步。对不起，对不起，你说吧。好的。亚米蒂不来，你愿意跟我出去吗？愿意。好嘞。
But again, the subtext is basically text here, with just enough plausible deniability that Singapore gave the show a PG. Oh, and I want to address the backlash I've seen regarding Lori. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that Lori was added in an attempt to pander to Christian audiences. That just couldn't be further from the truth. Remember, the whole point of this series is showing that each person comes from a different point of view and has a different experience. Yes, Lori is Christian, but it's not treated like a punchline, it's not overbearing, nobody makes fun of her for it or anything, and she doesn't think she's better than anyone else either. It's perfectly realistic. At the beginning of her episode, she prays that her team will do well, and we see her wear a cross necklace. She also does a sign of the cross later when her dad is losing his temper and turning into a blimp in the finale. But to add further detail and nuance, we see that her mom is doing tarot cards, which I think is meant to imply that Lori's religious beliefs stem from her dad. Lori's parents are separated, and it's never really revealed why. Lori asks her mom if she'll come to the championship game, and her mom says, "Oh, well, that's your dad's thing."
So, do you think you'll come?
I mean, I'm not like to the game, but I will think about you. Baseball's your dad's thing.
Sure. It's softball, but...
Oh, but maybe we could go to Magic Jewelry and pick out a new quartz necklace.
That's cool. No worries.
It's clear that Lori is only playing softball because her dad is passionate about it, and she wants to connect with him and make him proud. But she's really awful at it. And her anxiety manifests in a sentient blob named Sweaty, which keeps growing bigger and bigger until it's basically consuming her. Eventually, she has to remind herself and her dad that this is all just a game and that it's not actually that important. I promise this isn't some Kirk Cameron nonsense. Yes, Lori is Christian, and her story has some biblical parallels.
And we came up with the idea that Lori's challenge is between faith and doubt.
I have faith, but sometimes the doubt creeps in.
And the faith is faith in her father, but she's racked with doubt. And so he said, let's use that metaphor. So we used faith as like the Holy Spirit as a metaphor, and doubt would have been the snake. And so if you look in the final form of the blob monster, it's actually this coiled up around her like a giant snake.
But again, that's just her perspective of the events. If Laurie's character was really meant to pander to Christian audiences, I really don't think her parents would be divorced, and her mom certainly wouldn't be doing tarot cards. And remember, these characters were all being developed at the same time in a process that started 5 years ago, right after Biden had won the 2020 election. So yeah, the team at Pixar absolutely wanted to do more with Kai's character, and it's not their fault that they couldn't. It's the higher-ups that told them that they couldn't, and I think it's really not fair to hold that against the show when the team worked their butts off to make this happen and did everything they could to keep the representation intact. And I think they did a damn good job. Of course it sucks that the explicit references to Kai being trans were cut, but think about all the trans kids who will be able to actually see her story that won't ever get to see the Moon Girl episode. It's vitally important for trans kids to see that there are always going to be people out there who will love and accept them for who they are. Yes, the Moon Girl episode was leaked, which is insanely fitting given the story of the episode, and I hope trans kids are able to find it. But there's a lot of them who just won't. And I think it's especially important to see Kai represented alongside a character like Laurie, because it shows that these two things aren't mutually exclusive. I mean, of course they aren't, but a lot of people don't seem to realize that. I think there is a lot of value in presenting a strong allegory, subtext that can slip under the radar and reach those who need it most. And this isn't to say that I think it's enough to just have characters who are coded a certain way, just so you can skate around the censors or avoid backlash with plausible deniability. Sometimes you just have to say, hey, this show just won't run in China, and we can live with that. It's extremely important that creators get to tell the stories they want to tell in the way they want to tell them. Whether that storyteller grew up in the Italian Riviera, the Midwestern US, Canada, or spending the summers in a sleepy little town in Oregon with their great Aunt Lois.
Dipper and Mabel are inspired by me and my twin sister, Ariel. So the show is largely comes from our lives. I am not trans. However, I'm a person who experienced the mystery of trying to figure out how to deal with gender questions growing up. I mean, I feel like the 90s when I grew up, you watch TV and it'd be like, be a man, eat Slim Jims, kill someone.
Need a long statement? Step into a Slim Jim.
And I was like, is that what it means to be a man? How do I do this right? And I was raised in a home with a mom and a sister, and they were sort of my model for what it looks like in a house. So I put my questions about how does this all work into Dipper.
You keep telling me that being a man means doing all these tasks and being aggro all the time, but I'm starting to think that stuff's malarkey. You heard me, malarkey.
And people of all different parts of all different spectrums have said to me, like, I relate to this character. I think in fiction, the only thing I know how to do as a writer is you put your personal experience into it, you be as specific as you can, and the specific can become universal. So when somebody says to me, like, this character spoke to my life, I'm so, like, grateful that I got to be a part of somebody's childhood and that somebody found comfort in my characters. So like I really encourage people to any headcanon, any fiction, any way they want to dress up, like you do it. Like Dipper's yours. Like however you want to write him, however you want to dress as him, however you want to invent him, like please. Because it starts as my creation and I share it with all of you. So
because the paradox of representation is that oftentimes the more specific you get in your storytelling, the more universal it ends up being.